Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dropping In Surf Show. My name is Rob Case, paddling technique coach located in Northern California. On today's show, we have a special guest. His name is Michael Brand. He's located in Munich, Germany, and he's working on a product that helps surfers progress faster using data that's collected through your surfboard, or more so a device that's attached to your surfboard. It's non-intrusive, it collects a lot of data, and it converts that data into meaningful insights. So please enjoy our casual conversation. You're catching us kind of mid-conversation. As most surfers, when we get together, we talk about the surf, we talk about the weather, and specifically, that's where we begin our conversation. So enjoy.
From April
Okay.
around here, when it gets like ambient temperature will be like in the low 70s. The pool
Yeah.
gets up to like low 60s really, really quickly. So it
Yeah.
becomes manageable in a 3-2 or like a bad 4-3, and then you can go.
Yeah,
Um,
because you're surfing so much in an hour anyway, right? Like, do you ever do 2 hour sessions, like back to backs?
I haven't, but it wouldn't be an issue because you can walk back. So there's almost no paddling if you don't want there to be. Because you finish the wave, you kind of in the end section, you're done, you fall off your board and you just walk out and you walk back. And so the paddle back is maybe 35, 40 feet.
Don't tell a paddling coach that.
Yeah. It gets you super lazy when it comes to paddling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because the wave, once you know where to sit, all it does, it takes you two paddle strokes and you're in.
That's
Um,
beautiful. It's
so
beautiful.
yeah. But it's not a paddle
Oh,
coach.
I
A
know.
paddle coach's dream.
You know what? I still would love it. Like, it's funny because a lot of these pools do have that return, that current return. So you're saying nobody paddles up the wall?
Um, So it's a different it's the endless surf technology, right? Most of the
Yeah.
pools in that are commercially open are wave gardens, and with all of those, you have the paddle back that has a bit of a current, but you kind of go along this like middle part and you paddle back.
Yeah.
With the endless ones, you have the option to paddle back,
Yeah.
but if you finish your wave, your last turn puts you into white water, and then you're standing in knee deep water, and it makes more sense to just walk back rather than paddling back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, some people paddle back, especially they have these, which is probably the most fun part. They have these point sessions, which are 180 meters the total wave. So you're actually spending quite a bit of time on the wave.
Yeah.
With that one, if you fall off in like the third maneuver, people do paddle back.
Right.
But even then, there's the current pushes you back so much, it's not paddle training at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No. So in like Perfect Swell in Waco in Japan, there is a current along the wall, and even at Surf Ranch, there's a current along the fence, and it's really just all that water's moving one direction, and then after the waves go, it's got
yeah,
to return. It's just equalizing, and that's exactly what I teach in level two, actually, in the ocean. The ocean's doing the same thing, just on a grander scale. There's a lot the wave pools can teach us, but I wanted to chat with you and record this conversation. As you can see, I've already started recording. We're very casual on this podcast, but Mike Frampton at Surf Mastery introduced me to you because you developed a device called Trax Surf, TraxSurf, that is going to track data for various surfing activities. How would you describe it? Like if you were to summarize kind of your product and what you're trying to achieve.
so Trax was born from a personal frustration. I surfed quite a bit when I lived in California. Still continue to surf. Based in Germany, traveling every year, 2 or 3 surf trips, but kind of got stuck in my progression and was always a bit frustrated with how difficult coaching and surfing is and progression in surfing is. So the idea with Trax, by combining pressure sensor underneath your traction pad with a motion sensor on your board, is to record and analyze someone surfing as well as we can with current technology without using video, and to compare your data to a professional's reference data in order to give you feedback and coaching advice. So
Okay,
really
hold on.
simply,
Pause right
yeah.
there, Mike, because so just so that we can imagine, I'll try to throw up some visuals too, but you said pressure sensors and something to track, basically a gyroscope accelerometer that tracks the way the board moves, right? So I think what's different about your product than a lot of others that I've ever seen is the pressure sensor. Because you know, one of the things that I'm always scouring are academic studies on everything up until people are standing. That's kind of what I cover. And I've looked for pop-up studies. There's been one like dryland pop-up study, which doesn't really, it doesn't transfer to the water. So you're saying that like that kind of data is going to be collected, is like how you're landing, but also while you're riding, how much pressure. Because right now I just use my pressure dents in my surfboard for how hard I'm pushing.
And that's probably how most people are doing it. But yeah, that's exactly the idea. The idea is to gain a better understanding of, for example, if you're doing a bottom turn, how much pressure are you putting into your toes as you're going through your frontside bottom turn? How long are you holding that bottom turn? How quickly are you turning around? And to combine all the information to really understand what you're doing in the turn, and to then compare that to what a professional would be doing, and to then
Right.
tell you, hey, instead of putting 40% of your weight on your toes, if you were to put 60, but hold your turn a little bit longer, your turn would get you to the actual spot where you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And it's really to unlock this better understanding because, I mean, as we all have stood on surfboards, your own experience and your own feeling of standing on the wave might be quite different from what you end up seeing on video or what actually is happening on
Right.
the wave. And to kind of unlock this additional insight um, to help people then make often very minor changes to really, really step up their surfing to the next level.
Yeah, I find personally, because I'm constantly trying to update my surfing and progress more. It is, coaching's extremely valuable. Video coaching is extremely valuable. But then there's this, I always joke like that all these surf coaches, because I just stick to paddling, all the surf coaches have the hard job because it's really hard to translate what they're able to do in the moment at the right time on the wave with the board at the right angle, going the right speed. And oftentimes they revert to how things feel, right? And what I love about your product and what you're trying to achieve here is the granularity of irrespective of video, you're getting data at certain points on the wave, and then you're saying, okay, this is what a pro is doing at that same moment on that same similar wave, and that's where the wave pool kind of comes into play. And this is kind of this is objectively what's happening. Your toe pressure isn't enough or it's too much, right? You're stalling out at the bottom, and that's why you get hung up at the top, right? So go into the next wave or go into the next session with a lighter pressure. It's that simple. That is something that like I you can kind of see it on video. You can maybe have a surf coach kind of outline that for you, but this is the data behind the reasoning. And that's again, the math nerd in me loves the data. And I'll say when I do level 2 and I put sensors on people's hands and we measure the hand trajectory and everything, a lot of the video can tell me what that person needs to do. But the data reinforces it and it gives almost so much more weight to the purpose, if that makes sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I love that it's turning something objective into something that's more subjective, which is like feeling and it's blending the two kind of coaching styles, one which is data driven and the other is like feeling based and like what that a surfer needs to feel in the moment because a lot of things are unconscious movements.
And I
So I
think the
love I love
exciting
that.
part, I appreciate that. And I think the exciting part is that like some of the people who've been the most excited about it are surf coaches. Because the idea is not to replace them or to come into a world where all you need to use is Trax. The idea is to just give people who don't have access to good coaches or to a wave pool an ability to actually progress and to get objective feedback on their surfing, but also to give coaches and professional surfers or that higher level of people the ability to better understand what's actually happening on the wave, so they can coach better or coach more specifically to the needs or to the faults their students are making. And that's become quite obvious from discussions I've had with all kinds of like high level coaches, professional surfers who are, like I said, probably the most excited because it's not about replacing, it's about even bettering their ability to coach.
Yeah, 100%. Like the data that supports it, sometimes it surprises me, but oftentimes it doesn't, but it provides me with information on how to cue them. And again, I have the easier job. I can make someone do 1,000 strokes. So when we talk about what you're trying to do is emulate, okay, here's me, regular Joe Schmo surfer. I get my data back. It doesn't mean anything unless I can compare it to a benchmark. So in terms of benchmarking pros, and pros, I love everybody that I work with, but they are so good at what they do, they can't explain it, right? But this, they don't have to explain it. Their surfing explains it, right? So you're in Munich, you have the wave pool there. Is that going to be kind of where it starts? Is the baseline is going to be using the wave pool as the at least the standard playing field?
So with the development of Trax, or with the complexity that surfing brings with it, the idea is to kind of iteratively increase complexity. And we started off really, really simply by putting the same sensor system on a surf skate. So we had a land environment, everything was flat, everything was simple, and we were able to record data and differentiate between different types of maneuvers, meaning we could see a pump and we could see a snap. They looked quite differently in the data, which was good for machine learning purposes. We could also differentiate between a good snap and a bad snap, which is the other level of does the data look differentiable enough for us to teach the algorithms. But that was step one, was the super controlled environment. We're on land, nothing's moving. Data looks really, really good. Step two is now the wave pools, which gives us still a relatively controlled environment because every wave looks pretty much the same. Every wave behaves pretty much the same. We are
They are
able
different
to
though, as you know, like just with the way the water moves and the water depth. It's
the,
everyone. I'm just specifying that, and I sorry for interrupting, but a lot of people listening are like, wave pools, all the waves are the same. It's like not quite. There's subtleties, but yeah, go on.
there are subtleties. The wind plays a way bigger factor than you'd think because you'd think it's, hey, it's just a pool. It's like 200 meters long. How much of a factor can the wind play? But it does play quite a big of a factor. But all of that is stuff that we're going to learn once we hit the pool is how big of a difference does it actually make in the data? How differently should you do a turn in windy conditions than non-windy conditions? But the
Oh,
general
great
idea
point.
is to set a baseline for, again, maneuver differentiation. Can we differentiate between five maneuvers? And that's kind of the next phase. We're going to look for a bottom turn, a cutback, a top turn as a snap, a top turn as a carve, and a pump. That's kind of the five basic maneuvers that we're looking at next.
Yeah,
And then differentiating there between well execute, like good execution and poor execution
right.
again. And we have this in controlled environment where every wave is very close to the same. We can, which is also not like, or which is also great ability. We can get a lot of data really quickly, meaning we're currently expecting to need at the very least 50, more likely 500 of the same maneuver to kind of have a reference set.
Yeah.
If you were to try and get just 50 perfect bottom turns in the ocean in a similar type of wave, that
Hmm.
would take quite some time to actually get that recorded. What the wave pool allows us to do is basically, I don't know, take four professional surfers, have them surf 3 or 4 sessions, and just do 3 bottom turns a wave, and you've got all that data. So it really allows us to iterate extremely quickly in a relatively controlled environment to set the baseline to again differentiate between maneuvers and maneuver quality. And then the next level is to take that into the ocean and move that forward. But the pools allow us to stay in a relatively controlled environment while getting as close to the ocean as we probably can without any of the downside that the ocean
Yeah,
does
and I would
unfortunately bring.
expect a compounding effect of the data as well. Like, once you kind of set that benchmark, you have the baseline. As more surfers then surf the pool or surf other, if there's this compounding of information, it's just going to reinforce. I doubt that you're gonna find huge outliers once you get the baseline set, right? So that's what I would expect. It's just the law of averages at that point. That's
I agree.
phenomenal.
Yep.
So, one of the things that I always go back to is like we've seen products like this before with Trace, which, moved on to snowboarding and skiing. I think there's a new one coming out that I just saw on Instagram this morning. And what I think it is different about yours is the meaningfulness of, okay, so this thing collects data. And for data nerds like me, I love it. Like I'll collect data, but then I need to convert it into something meaningful. How is it going to help me? Tell us more about like what the AI is going to, the machine learning is going to do for it.
So the idea is it's really this coaching aspect. It's really getting an understanding, gaining understanding together with coaches during the training of what it is that the data tells us about your surfing. Does it tell us you are generally have too much weight in your back foot? That's why you get bogged down. That's why you get stuck. That's why you get stuck at the end of a cutback and why you can't get back into the green part of the wave. Um, and what can you do about it? I think that's the big part. Tracking everything is kind of cool and telling you what's wrong is really cool, but the big difference maker is having the ability to then figure out ways to fix what you're doing wrong and help you progress.
Yeah.
The idea is one, to tell you specifically and to have the AI figure out ways to specifically tell you what you're doing wrong. And then step two is what type of land-based maneuvers, and that can be either fully free on land with just teaching your body certain movements and getting that muscle memory ingrained into your system, or on a surf skate potentially, which specific drills are the ones that fit with your patterns in your surfing. And I think
Right.
that's where we will be working with huge data sets. We're combining 9 degrees of freedom on the motion sensor. We're combining multiple pressure points across your board. All of that gets combined or compared to other huge data reference sets. And what the machine learning algorithms help us is just bring in insight into that flood of data.
Yeah.
And very importantly, make it actionable to you as a surfer so you can go into your next session knowing exactly which part it is that's holding you back the most. What's the next unlock? Because it can also be an issue for somebody. They're like, I need to move my shoulder really quickly in the top turn to get the turn done. But maybe that's not even your problem, but your problem is still in the bottom turn because your setup is wrong. You will never actually get to the top turn.
Right.
So what the algorithms help us do is take this flood and this huge amounts of data to really to take insight from it and to make it actionable.
See, that I love because it breaks it down to the root cause of your problem. Like, yeah, to your point, you can't even get to the top because your bottom turn. You can't get to the bottom because your pop-up's messed up because you keep stalling. You don't get enough speed coming out of the takeoff. Like, and then we could even back it up to paddling. I will throw in paddling into this conversation
Yes.
as the basis of all of it. But let me get back to the kind of the granularity of the data. And I know that, like I said, I've kicked off with academic studies. Um, you've been in contact with a few academics. Are they planning to maybe use this? Because when I look up studies, the first study I always find is here's a study on the equipment we used and why we get to use this equipment. So they're first going to do a study on the equipment, and then they go and they do the study with that equipment, and then that's the stuff that I like. But there's always a study about the equipment. Are you working with some people to use Trax, or are you just having conversations with them about what Trax is trying to do? What's kind of your tie into academia?
Both. I mean, the big problem and opportunity, I think, for both what you're looking at, but also what I'm looking at, is that there just hasn't been much academia or research in surfing. If you're trying to figure out studies about the actual surfing, if you're trying to figure out about how a surfboard behaves in water, all these types of studies are highly limited. But I have reached out to various people and to academics to see if they'd be interested in working together. What one person, Brendan Ferry at Napier, is doing. He's launching the Surf Lab up in Scotland, where they also have a wave pool, and he is trying to fill that gap and figure out more ways to include academic research with surfing, or to combine academic research with surfing. And yes, he will get a unit. They have tried to do some studies from a different perspective on this. So they have built custom surfboards that had GPS on them, that had IMU on them, just to really understand for example, what the flow on top of a board does underneath, how different fins behave. For example, they've done studies on so does this one actually give you a boost in speed and everything else? And they have gotten solid results from them, but it's always very technical, not very actionable. And I think what the cool thing was about the discussions I've had with Brendan was just how excited he was and how we can kind of just help people better understand surfing, which should then help the sport progress. One example, which is probably just at the intersection between what you've been looking at and what we'll be looking at, is pop-up timing, something that should be or could be explored quite simply using Trax. When is the right moment to pop up in the typical type of wave? Is it earlier, is it later? What does it depend on? How much does the board angle play a role? At what board angle and speed are you actually ready to pop up? All these types of questions where we can just collect data really, really easily and quite broadly should help academia. And I've been working with Marcio, who's been a researcher in Portugal, who's done a lot of work on surf research. He has a vision of creating this global data pool where we take all that data together to make it accessible to research. And I'm super open to supporting that because I do think there is a lot of cool stuff we can learn with surfing. Surfing is a extremely fast growing sport that deserves to have more data included in it. And if I can be part of that, I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I used Marcio's studies from when he was at University of Porto quite often in some of my conversations, live streams. I can't stress to the audience how much work you guys are doing with data. Like I do not envy you. Like, there's a lot of data that these things can collect, and then having to sort, find patterns, run algorithms to make it meaningful. That's where the value is. That's where the work is. And, as someone who's a very amateur scientist, that I think is one of the most difficult things to do. Talk to us a little bit about the hardware. Kind of what would a surfer expect on their surfboard? Because you talked about how Brendan was using actual surfboards that were actually designed to collect data. Well, obviously, a regular run-of-the-mill surfer is not going to go out and buy one of those. What is, how does Trax collect the data, at least right now, and then kind of future visions of maybe what it might look like? Because that's the thing with surfers. We don't like, things looking bad. Like we're first, we're such narcissists in that we have to make it look good first, and then the science will come. So like, how did you design that so that it's not so intrusive?
That was always the first step because Trax is it will be a consumer product. So it is consumer facing. Yes, professionals will use it and will use for coaching, and academia can use it, but the focus is clearly on making this accessible to the everyday surfer. And what we'll do is we will design our own traction pad that has the pressure sensors embedded directly in it. It'll look like a regular traction pad, mostly, but it'll look like a regular traction pad. We might get some different colors so all the narcissists can keep their favorite colors going. But it won't look too different. People will have to remove their existing traction pad,
Yeah.
which is possible, but that's one thing that has to be done. But you just glue on our traction pad and that's it. That includes all the pressure sensors. What we then need is the actual computing unit as well as the motion sensors, and those will be put into a relatively small box. And we will use the space. If you look at your surfboard, at the base of your traction pad towards the tail of your surfboard, there's a surprising amount of rubber that's actually not, or foam that's actually not really needed on the traction pad. And we will use that space, cut some parts out of it to use it and place the sensing unit, so the motion sensing unit as well as the computing unit in that space without it affecting really anything that you do. You can still push your traction pad as far back as you want without getting close to the leash plug. You can still put your same leash on as before because it won't interfere with the sensor. But we're really using that space that's between the, let's say, highest point of your kick tail, where it
Yeah.
first starts off, and your leash plug, which is a little less than an inch for most people.
Yeah.
And we'll use that to our advantage to place the sensors.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's great. It's almost, I mean, I would say 95% of recreational surfers aren't using their kick pad anyway. So that might be a lesson right there. It's like, get your foot back on the kick pad, guys. Um,
That's very like the step one. So the version we're working on right now is quite focused on the well, close to the kick tail, like putting your foot in the right position. I'm fairly certain that as soon as I'll stand up on it personally, we will have many waves where there's no data recorded just because my foot's in the wrong place. And that's going to be
Yeah.
the thing for many, many surfers where the initial feedback, and we will have in the commercial units, we will have sensors further up all the way throughout the traction pad
Yeah.
because the feedback very likely will be for many people is just to move your foot a bit further back to actually be able to control the board, which is again super insightful detail that many people probably aren't focused on right now, or probably don't realize where their foot is standing as they pop up,
Yeah.
and which would dramatically like change your surfing if you've ever tried to, I don't know, do a bottom turn with your foot all the way up front to your traction pad.
Totally.
Probably didn't look too good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so basically the back foot is what you would f be focusing on and the tail. Any thoughts on moving that sensor all the way up to the front foot?
Um, two thoughts with that. So for training purposes, there is a pretty good chance that we will also do front foot tracking, just to get that additional data and to teach the algorithm. In the consumer version, I would like to avoid it for two reasons. One, pressure sensors are really expensive, and we want to keep the cost at a point where it's affordable to the everyday surfer, and not a huge investment, but basically you can choose between having a couple of coaching lessons or you can buy tracks.
Yeah.
So that's part one, is just keep the cost low. The other is you have to run a physical wire from the pressure sensor to the computing unit, which is at the tail of your surfboard. And
It's gonna look ugly.
there's it's not going to look good. That's step one, and it's gonna break.
Yeah.
And to stay away from having to troubleshoot ripped out wires every
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
the idea is to understand what your front foot is doing based on your back foot.
Yeah, that makes total
And
sense because they're complementary to each other to a certain extent.
and once we know your weight and once we know your acceleration that you're going through a turn with, figuring out your front foot weight, how much weight do you have in your front foot, is relatively simple math.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear. Yeah, no, I love it. It's a mathematical solution to a problem that is very real here. That, I can imagine if you had wires up and down the whole board, it's not going to be conducive to the consumer. But, for academics and to set that benchmark, I think that's super wise to try and put a few of those in there for sure. Um,
And
yeah.
and we have seen and it's been seen in other sports. So many other sports have data and have a lot of reference data and have similar products. Skiing, for example, where
Mhm.
there's a company that started off also with a combination of motion and pressure sensors. They collected reference data, and in their version two, they were able to work without pressure sensors because they had such a vast pool of reference data of everything that in version two, all they need is a motion sensor to then determine what your pressure is doing. So, as you mentioned earlier, over time, the reference data gets better, your data pool gets better, and it allows you to do many different things and to advance and to basically build a simpler product in the sense that it's an easier to use for the end consumer
Mhm.
while maintaining or having even more ability to give feedback and generate feedback. So there's also a lot of hope from just seeing other sports that have worked with similar products or have worked with similar types of data and how they were able to progress over the course of building more reference data.
Yeah, yeah. What about for the non-data nerd? Like the surfer that's like they want to progress, but they don't really want all the data. Are you gonna just kind of simplify the results and the progress steps? Like, where do you see long term? Because I could see people just kind of burning out on just too much data. Like right now, I get data from every surf session, and I'm trying to compile something to find patterns, but I'm like unique. I know a lot of people wouldn't even do that. They get their Dawn Patrol app, they look at it, for about a month and then they forget about it. So how do you see it long term with people that aren't super data oriented?
Um, the question is how much data does the everyday surfer actually need? So if we're going to the consumer product, do they need to know that they put 42% of their toe weight on their or weight on their toes during a bottom turn? Or is it enough to give them one actionable drill after a session
Yeah.
to really make them progress between sessions? And I think that's more of the idea for the consumer product, where it's about keep it relatively simple. Don't, like you said, flood them with data. Sure, we'll track stats. We can tell you what your fastest wave was, so you can tell your friends, and we can tell you how many waves you've caught and how many times you've wiped out and what your best turn was,
Yeah.
so to speak, or what your highest acceleration during a turn. But the takeaways are supposed to be quite simple and actionable. And then and I think that's really important, the difference between a DOM control app, because surfing is so difficult, because you have such a long time to progress, you will gain insights and be able to use those insights for quite some time. It's
Yeah.
not like a session where you know, okay, I've caught four waves, I've gone, I don't know, my GPS watch flipped out once and told me I went 100 miles an hour for half a second and came back and um, what am I going to do with that? And you start looking at it because the level of insight and the level of now what, or like level of so what, starts getting limited. The idea is to be a partner to surfers throughout this entire progression journey. And then the flood of data, so all the detailed insight data, that's probably going to be reserved to coaches and to professionals who really need that insight.
Yeah.
But it's exactly to avoid what you're saying. I don't think there's a point of throwing a million data points at the everyday surfer. And it's probably a lot more powerful. Just tell them one or two things that they can fix and how can fix them.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's the again, that's the conversion or the translation of what the data is meaning. How is it meaningful? And I would suggest, that being kind of the first thing that someone sees on their app or on their watch from the session, but then have an option to be like, well, why? Like, why is that the insight? Oh, because it's 41% toe pressure. For someone like me that and adults, what I found in teaching the why, it gives them more purpose and motivation to go through the drills versus, there are a lot of people that just want the action, not the why. They don't care about the why. So just my 2 cents as someone that likes the why, you know.
I completely agree. And that personally, I would too. I would want to
Yeah.
know, and I want to know the percentage too. I want to know what it feels like. I want to know what 40 feels like, what 60 feels like, what 80 feels like, just so you can kind
Yes.
of
Your
better
brain is
understand.
calibrating it. Yeah, exactly. Because it's not meaningful until you and yourself calibrate to what that data is spitting out. So when your machine learning says I need to apply more pressure to my toes, like what is more, right? That's relative to what my brain senses. And so, it's almost like we get to be scientists in ourselves using your product as well and being like, oh, okay, that was too much. This is too little. And you find kind of like your own calibration of what is the Goldilocks amount of pressure at a certain point in time. I love it. I don't know. I'm a fan. I can't wait to nerd out on it. Um, so let's maybe finish off on just why. Like I like going through all the critical questions. So why develop something like this? Like, I mean, this is to me, I love it and like I'm very excited about something like this. But for you, like what is the deep why? Why develop this? Why did you leave your previous career to come do this and be in this terrible industry of the surf and kind of try to progress it?
So I think the biggest driver was a personal frustration, both with surfing progression, but also with, I mean, I've told you I was in finance before, worked as an investor for a long time, stopped finding it extremely meaningful and just wanted to do something where I could make a difference to people in that sense. And being able to combine that with one of my biggest passions, which is surfing, which has been a passion for the past 15 years and always been there. And then the times when I felt the best were when I went surfing, was kind of the dream scenario. And I think it's important that I don't think this needs to be something that every surfer has to do. But I think just like every other sport has done, I'd like to make it accessible to everybody who wants it and to give people the opportunity to progress their surfing more quickly and to maybe make the sport more accessible to some people who left because they were frustrated.
Yeah.
Because I know I've left surf sessions where I was like, hey, I'm done. I'm not gonna surf again because what's the point? I'm not catching waves. I'm gonna fall on every turn that I do, and then what? Like I fly back to Europe and I don't surf for 6 months, and then it's the same thing next time. And I think to kind of give people the opportunity to continue to progress, which is I think what we all still enjoy, is just getting better at something that you spend quite a lot of time doing while having access to like really, really good coaching and being able to work on yourself in a sport that an extreme amount of people are extremely passionate about. It's just something that sounded really, really exciting to me.
Yeah.
So I think it was mostly something that I could personally get behind. that kept me up at night, where I was thinking about, hey, how can we make this better? And that I think would be to many surfers quite a great addition to their quiver and to their progression.
Yeah. It's very cool, man. Well, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your reason for doing it as well. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So where people can kind of find more information is just at the website, traxsurf.com, Trax surf.
Right now, it's the website, it's tracksurf.com. There's a mailing list. If people sign up to that one, they get detailed insights. I send a newsletter about once a month just to keep those people up to date. There is an Instagram to kind of get people more aware of it as well. And then as soon as we start doing more detailed pool tests and everything else, we'll stream that throughout the website and the and newsletter. But yes, those are the ways you can
Cool.
find us right now.
And just to clarify, it's not just going to be pool. It's where we're starting the pool where it's controlled, and we're going to start to collect more data in the ocean, and it's just going to grow kind of from there.
100%. The pool
Yeah.
is just the controlled environment that allows us to iterate more quickly and iterate more cleanly, which I think is the important thing too, to collect incredible reference data. And then the ocean is always the long-term goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Michael. Appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to kind of the journey and watching the journey forward.
Thank you for having me. This
All
was
right.
great.
Appreciate it, bud.